absolutely, people are going to lose their homes, they're going to lose their businesses. That there's not enough money in circulation to pay back all the interest and all the principal on the debt that generated the need to loan more money, and the fishing line then goes back in.
The world financial system is as simple as can be. It can be summed up in one short sentence. You lend people money that doesn't exist and you charge them interest on it. That's it. Everything else comes out of that. This world is up to its neck in debt on money that has never, does not, and will never exist. The more you can get people, businesses, and governments in debt, the more you can artificially inflate the cost of the basics of life, the more you are pressurizing people to serve your system, be a robot and a clone of it, so that they can earn the money to pay for the basics of life. If everyone went to the banks tomorrow and took out what they theoretically have deposited there, the banks would be bankrupt so many times it'd be in the Guinness Book of Records. They haven't got it. So when we take out a loan, oh, please tell me, Mother, this is not true. They type in to your account the amount you've flipping loaned. That's all they do. From that moment, you start paying interest on money that doesn't exist. The American government wants to borrow, say, $1 billion more than it's actually taken in taxation. Now it's the government. It could actually print its own money interest-free if it chose to. But of course, if it did that, you're removing massive amounts of power from the global banking system, which is controlled by the same people that decide who's going to be president of the United States. So they don't print their own money interest-free. They issue an IOU to a cartel of private banks known laughably as the Central Bank of America, known as the Federal Reserve System. So they issue the government an IOU to this cartel of private banks for $1 billion. The banks then type into the government's account $1 billion. That's all they've done. From that moment on, the American taxpayer, via the government, starts paying interest on $1 billion.
It's interesting when you look at life and people in general that we don't tend to ask the big questions. We tend to just focus on the little questions. So we'll ask about how much money this costs or how much money I'm earning and all the rest of it. But we don't ask the big question, which is, what is money? And if we don't know what money is, then we can't understand how we're manipulated through the money system and how what we call banking is legalized theft. And because, of course, it doesn't mean it's lawful, if you like. It doesn't mean it's right or just. It just means it operates within the laws that those that control the banking system and at the same time control the political system have passed to allow banks to be legalized, corrupt robbers of the people. And they do it like this. And to understand this banking crisis, we've really got to understand, first of all, what money is. When you go into a bank and you ask for a loan on a house or car or whatever, what did the bank do? I mean, what was the process? And again, we don't seem to ask those questions. Oh, well, they lend us money. Well, okay. Well, where do they get it from?
Money doesn't really exist. It's a theory. If you look at how the world's been acquired, it's been done by a banking scam where you lend people money that doesn't exist. We call it credit. And you charge them interest on it. And if they don't pay the money back plus interest, then you get their wealth that does exist. You get their home, their business, their land, their resources, whatever. And we've been through a process of banks lending credit, figures on a screen, greatly in excess of what they have as assets, called fractional reserve lending. Then when they can't pay it back, because often the banks have taken actions that have crashed the economy, like in 2008, the banks then get all the things they've lent money on, the real wealth of the world. And what's happened in this process of lending credit, getting the real resources when they can't pay back the credit, has sucked the wealth of the world, the real wealth of the world, into the hands of a very, very few people, and left out there most of the rest of the population with something called money. And money only buys anything because we take it seriously. You know, if it's just a piece of paper, and this is the point, it's meant not even to be a piece of paper, it's meant to be purely electronic. So we have this fresh air money that is worth something because the buyer and the seller believe in it, and only because of that. And the real wealth of the world has been sucked into the hands of a very few people by lending this scam called credit. Another interesting thing about this money situation is when you go to a bank and you say borrow £50,000, they'll type into your account £50,000 in credit. Where's the credit come from? Here.
What has happened, because the same network of families that I've been exposing all this time have controlled, indeed created the banking system as we know it, have also controlled the politicians that pass legislation about banking laws and finance. Laws have been passed to create something called fractional reserve lending. It sounds a boring title and all the rest of it, but we really need to understand what this means. Fractional reserve lending allows banks to lend at least, and it is at least, 10 times what they actually have on deposit. It's called credit. You know, people say, there's a credit crunch. What does that mean? It means that loans of, in effect, non-existent money are not being made on the scale they were before, but I'll come to that in a second. You go into a bank and you put $1 in a bank, say. That bank can now lend 9-10 times that dollar because the law says you only have to have something like 10% of your theoretical money that bank has on deposit. All the rest you can loan out. So you go into a bank and you borrow $50,000, say. Now, what the bank has done to create that is type into your account $50,000. It's not there, it's called credit, $50,000. From that moment, you start paying interest on $50,000 to that bank that has been created simply by someone at the bank typing $50,000 into your account. Staggering, but true. They've not moved precious metal anywhere. They've not moved real money into your account, but the theoretical figures on a screen money that they create out of thin air.
But perhaps the most grotesque aspect of this whole nonsense of interest on money is what we call third world debt. Third world debt has crucified vast tracts of our fellow humanity and continues to do minute by minute. The third world debt is debt on money that has never, does not, and will never exist.